My name is Alyssa Grant, I'm 27 years old, and until last Sunday, I still believed my dad loved me, even if he never really showed it. Father's Day was supposed to be special. I'd spent the entire week planning a surprise lunch for my parents at their favorite diner. I even made a scrapbook filled with photos of us from when I was little, the few moments where we actually looked happy together. I wanted that day to be different. I wanted him to see how much I cared, how much I'd always cared. But when I handed him the scrapbook, he barely flipped through the pages. He set it down, sighed, and then looked straight at me. And then he said the one sentence I can never unhear. You know, Alyssa, sometimes I wish you weren't born. The whole diner seemed to go silent. My mom froze, my younger brother Ethan stared at the table, and I just sat there. I felt my heart break and my body go numb at the same time. I wanted someone to defend me, to say he didn't mean it, to say I mattered. But nobody said a word. I grabbed my keys, walked out of the diner, and sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could even breathe again. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Because if my own father could look me in the eye on Father's Day and tell me I shouldn't exist, maybe it was time I stopped existing in his world. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, I always felt like the extra piece of the puzzle, the one no one really asked for but kept around anyway. My dad, Mark Grant, was the strong, silent type. To everyone else, he was the hard-working mechanic who never missed a day at the shop. But at home, he was distant, almost cold. When I was 6, I remember standing on the driveway, holding up my first report card with straight A's. "That's good," he said flatly, before turning back to work on the car. My brother Ethan brought home a B the next week, and Dad ruffled his hair and said, "Attaboy." It wasn't just about grades. It was everything. Ethan was the golden child, good at sports, easygoing, funny. Dad showed up to all his baseball games, cheered from the stands, even took him out for ice cream afterward, win or lose. When I had my first dance recital, Dad stayed home, because someone had to fix the dishwasher. Mom sat in the audience with a tight smile, whispering, "Your dad's tired, Alyssa. Don't take it personally." But I always did. I worked harder. I cleaned the house without being asked, babysat Ethan so Mom could run errands, brought Dad coffee when he was in the garage. He never thanked me. Not once. Instead, his attention only came when I messed up. Forgot to take the trash out? Do you ever think ahead? Left the porch light on? You're just wasting money. And yet, a part of me never stopped trying to win him over. I told myself that if I could just be perfect, if I could just be good enough, one day he'd look at me the way he looked at Ethan, with pride. But that day never came. And by the time I was a teenager, I had learned to swallow my hurt, smile at the dinner table, and pretend it didn't matter that my own dad barely seemed to notice me unless he was disappointed. When I moved out at 19 to attend community college, I thought putting some distance between me and my family would help. Maybe Dad would miss me. Maybe that would change things. But every visit home was the same. I would plan ahead, bake his favorite pecan pie, bring him little gifts, tell him about my classes. He'd nod, maybe grunt, then ask Ethan how football practice was going. After graduation, I stayed in Cedar Falls so I could be closer to my parents. I turned down an internship in Chicago because Mom said it would be nice to have one kid around. So I stayed. I worked long shifts as a nurse at the local clinic, saving money so I could buy Dad a new set of tools for his shop last Christmas. When I gave them to him, his first words were, "Didn't you spend too much on this?" Ethan could bring home a pack of cheap beer and Dad would act like it was the most thoughtful thing in the world. I kept trying anyway. Every Father's Day, every birthday, I was there. I sent cards, I cooked meals, I made sure Ethan and Mom were included. I became the glue that held everyone together. But instead of feeling appreciated, I felt invisible. One winter night, I worked a double shift at the clinic, came home at midnight, and found Dad sitting in the living room. I thought maybe he'd thank me for helping cover extra hours during flu season. Instead, he said, "You should have been home earlier. Your mom had to cook dinner herself tonight." That was my life in a nutshell. No matter what I did, it was never enough. And still, some naive part of me hoped that one day, just one day, he would see me. See all the things I did for him, for this family, and say, "I'm proud of you, Alyssa." So when Father's Day rolled around this year, I poured my heart into making it special. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would finally be the moment where he smiled at me and meant it. I didn't know it would be the day that broke me instead. Father's Day morning, I woke up early to get everything perfect. I'd made reservations at Harlow's Diner, Dad's favorite place, and even convinced Ethan to show up on time, which was a miracle in itself. I wore a new dress, bought with the last of my paycheck, because I wanted to look nice. I wanted this day to feel different. When we all sat down, I handed Dad the scrapbook I had stayed up making for 3 nights in a row. Pictures from birthdays, camping trips, even old Polaroids of us fixing up my first bike together. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. But then he shut the book, pushed it aside, and sighed. "You know, Alyssa, sometimes I wish you weren't born." The words hit me like a punch. My fork slipped out of my hand and clattered against the plate. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan looked down at his coffee, suddenly fascinated by the swirls of cream. No one said anything. I waited. I waited for Mom to scold him, for Ethan to say, "Dad, that's too far." But the silence stretched so long it felt deafening. I felt hot tears sting my eyes. My heart was pounding, my throat tight. Without saying a word, I grabbed my purse and keys and stood up. The bell over the diner door jingled as I walked out, but no one followed me. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. And right there, in that parking lot, I decided I was done. Done begging for scraps of love. Done staying where I was never wanted. Done pretending this was a family. I turned the key in the ignition and drove away, not just from the diner, but from the life I had been breaking myself to hold together. The first week after leaving Cedar Falls felt like floating in limbo. I had no plan, just a suitcase, my car, and a determination not to look back. I drove until the familiar streets faded behind me and eventually ended up in Burlington, Vermont, a town I'd never been to but whose quiet streets and small cafes felt like they could be mine. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a bookstore. It was cramped, and the paint peeled in corners, but it was mine. The first night, I unpacked only the essentials: clothes, my journal, and a few mementos I refused to let go of, like my grandmother's locket. I found a small job as a barista at a local cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but the regulars were kind, and for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly worried about someone criticizing me. I earned enough to pay rent, buy groceries, and even start a small savings account. For the first time, I was living for me. Slowly, I started building a new life. I joined a weekend art class, just for fun. I volunteered at the animal shelter on Sundays, which brought me joy I hadn't felt in years. I even made friends, people who knew nothing about my family drama, who valued me for who I was. Most nights, though, I still caught myself thinking about Dad's words. Sometimes, I cried quietly in my apartment, letting the anger and pain finally surface. But with every tear, I felt a little lighter. I also began journaling daily, not just to document my life, but to remind myself that my existence mattered. Every small victory, every new friend, every quiet evening alone with my coffee and a book reinforced the fact that I could survive, and even thrive, on my own. Months passed. I stopped checking my phone constantly, stopped expecting calls from home. I realized that disappearing wasn't just about leaving my family behind. It was about reclaiming my own story. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel peace again. I was no longer just Alyssa Grant, the daughter who could never be enough. I was Alyssa Grant, whole, independent, and capable of building a life I loved. About 6 months after I left, the calls started. At first, it was my mom. "Alyssa, your dad isn't doing well. Maybe you should come home for a visit." I hesitated, but a small, vulnerable part of me thought maybe this was genuine. Maybe he regretted what he said. But then came the subtle guilt trips. Emails from Dad that sounded casual but were loaded with accusation. "We're worried about you. You've been gone so long. Don't you care about your family?" Ethan sent a text that read like a peace offering. "Hey sis. I know I never defended you, and I'm sorry. Mom and Dad aren't easy to deal with. I miss you." I wanted to respond, even considered it. But I paused, thinking back to the words that had broken me. Then the real manipulation began. Mom called me multiple times, claiming Dad was hospitalized, a scare tactic to see if I would rush back. Friends back home texted me, relaying messages like, "Your father is sick, and he's asking for you," clearly orchestrated by them. Even Ethan wavered. His apologies felt half-hearted, like he wanted to ease his own guilt without challenging our parents. But I refused. I learned to trust my instincts. Every time I felt the pull to go back, I reminded myself that returning would mean stepping into the same pattern of pain and neglect. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, and I wasn't about to let anyone drag me back into a world where my worth was measured by someone else's approval. I blocked the manipulative calls, limited messages from home, and told myself firmly, I am allowed to choose myself. With each passing day, their attempts to pull me back lost their power. My life, my joy, my independence, these were mine to protect. For the first time, I truly felt in control of my own narrative. Sitting in my small apartment one rainy evening, I finally let myself reflect on everything that had happened. I thought about Father's Day, the words that had shattered me, the silence that had broken my heart, and the years I had spent trying to earn approval that would never come. And I realized something. Leaving wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't about punishing my family. It was survival. I had reclaimed my life. I had built a home that was safe, surrounded myself with people who truly valued me, and created routines and experiences that filled me with joy. I understood now that love isn't conditional, and family isn't automatically those who share your last name. Family is shown through care, respect, and support. I had learned to choose myself without guilt. I had learned that my existence mattered, not because anyone said so, but because I chose to make it matter. Sometimes, I still think of Dad, Mom, and even Ethan. But those thoughts no longer hold the power to make me small. They are just reminders of a life I left behind to become someone who knows her worth. And I smile, thinking of my own small victories. Sunday morning coffees at the cafe I love, quiet walks through the park, laughter with new friends, and the peace that comes from knowing I am enough. I've learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Family is proven by love, not just blood. And for the first time in my life, Father's Day doesn't hurt me anymore. Now, it's a quiet celebration of my own strength, my own life, and the love I finally give to myself. I am Alyssa Grant, whole, free, and unbroken.